The governor's ball is more important than your cancer treatments. Find someone else to watch your kids, my mother snapped, her voice slicing through the hospital consultation room like a knife. I sat frozen, clutching my phone with trembling fingers as the oncologist's diagnosis still rang in my ears. Stage 3 breast cancer. Aggressive treatment needed immediately. My name is Megan Sullivan, 34 years old, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the family disappointment. The black sheep who never quite measured up to my parents' expectations or my younger brother Ryan's achievements. Now, sitting in Boston Memorial Hospital on a crisp autumn afternoon, I faced the battle of my life. Not just against cancer, but against the crushing realization that the people who should care the most had once again abandoned me when I needed them most. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The oncologist, Dr. Patel, had stepped out momentarily to give me privacy after delivering the devastating news. My 4-year-old twins, Ellie and Noah, were coloring quietly in the corner, blissfully unaware that their mother's world had just imploded. Their innocent faces, so like their father's, made my heart constrict with fear. What would happen to them if the treatment didn't work? Who would care for them during my weeks of chemotherapy and radiation when I'd be too sick to function? With no close friends in the area since our move from Portland 6 months ago, and my husband Michael's death in a construction accident just before the move, my parents were my only option. They lived just 20 minutes away in their sprawling Beacon Hill townhouse, a home I'd helped them purchase 3 years ago when they decided to retire early. Every month without fail, despite my own financial struggles as a freelance graphic designer and single mother, I sent them $2,200 to help with their mortgage and country club membership. I did it out of love and duty, believing families should support each other. How foolish I'd been. "Mom, please," I whispered, my voice breaking. "The doctor says I need to start treatment next week. The twins need somewhere to stay during my worst days. It would only be twice a week for a few hours." "Megan, you've always been so dramatic," my mother interrupted, her voice dripping with annoyance. "Cancer treatments aren't what they used to be. My friend Diane's cousin had breast cancer and she barely missed a day of golf. You're making this sound like the end of the world." I closed my eyes, fighting back tears. "The oncologist says my case is aggressive. The treatments will be intense. I can't care for 2 4-year-olds while—" "Your father and I have finally started enjoying our retirement," she cut in sharply. "We're not giving that up to babysit. The governor's ball is the social event of the season. Do you have any idea how hard it was to get those tickets? Your brother pulled strings with his connections." Of course she brought up Ryan, Harvard, law graduate, now partner at one of Boston's most prestigious firms. My parents' pride and joy, the golden child who could do no wrong. "I'm not asking you to miss the ball," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "That's not for another 3 weeks. I'm asking for help with the first chemotherapy session next Tuesday." A heavy sigh came through the phone. "Tuesday is our wine tasting club. You know that." I didn't know that, but I did know that a wine tasting apparently took precedence over helping their daughter battle cancer while caring for their only grandchildren. "What about Dad? Could he—" "Your father agrees with me completely," she said firmly. "You've become a real burden ever since Michael died, Megan. Always needing something. Always asking for help. We're retired now. We deserve to enjoy our lives without your constant problems." A burden. The word hit me like a physical blow. I had been supporting them financially for years. I had put my own savings on hold to help fund their early retirement. Even after Michael died and our financial situation became precarious, I continued sending money every month. And now, when I needed them for the first time, truly needed them, I was a burden. Dr. Patel returned, concern etched on her face as she saw the tears streaming down my cheeks. She gently placed a box of tissues in front of me as I ended. the call. "Family issues?" she asked kindly. I nodded, unable to speak. "I understand this is overwhelming," she continued. "Most patients find it difficult to manage childcare during treatment. We have a patient support coordinator who can help connect you with resources." "Thank you," I managed to say. I was hoping my parents could help, but not everyone can handle the reality of cancer, Dr. Patel said diplomatically. "My colleague, Nurse Ramirez, specializes in helping patients with young children navigate treatment. Would you like me to ask her to come in?" Before I could answer, Ellie toddled over, her small hand clutching a colorful drawing. "Look, Mommy, it's a unicorn to make you feel better." I pulled my daughter into a gentle hug, inhaling the sweet scent of her strawberry shampoo. Noah joined us, wrapping his arms around my neck from the other side. These precious children had already lost their father. The thought of them potentially losing me too was unbearable. "Dr. Patel, yes, please. I'd like to speak with Nurse Ramirez." While we waited, I tried to process my mother's words. I'd always known our relationship was complicated. My parents had made it clear throughout my childhood that I wasn't the daughter they'd hoped for. Too artistic, not academic enough. When I chose art school over the business degree they wanted for me, they barely spoke to me for a year. When I married Michael, a contractor without a college degree, they attended the wedding but made their disapproval known to everyone who would listen. Yet, despite all that, I'd maintained the relationship, sent cards on birthdays and anniversaries, called weekly, visited monthly, supported them financially. I'd believed that beneath it all, there was still love, that when it truly mattered, they would be there for me. Now I knew the truth. Nurse Ramirez arrived, a warm, motherly woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile. She sat with me for over an hour, explaining options I hadn't known existed. A local organization called Cancer Care Companions provided volunteer childcare for patients during treatment days. There was a support group specifically for single parents with cancer that offered practical help as well as emotional support. The hospital itself had a partnership with a nearby daycare that offered subsidized rates for patients' children. "You're not alone in this, Megan," Nurse Ramirez assured me, patting my hand. "Many of our patients face similar challenges. We can help you create a practical plan for the twins while you focus on getting better." For the first time since receiving my diagnosis, I felt a glimmer of hope. I might not have my parents' support, but there were people willing to help, strangers who showed more compassion than my own family. As we gathered our things to leave, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Your father and I have discussed. We can watch the twins for 2 hours next Thursday while you go to your appointment, but you'll need to drop them off with activities to keep them occupied. We have plans later that day." I stared at the message, a strange calm settling over me. 2 hours, on Thursday, when my first treatment was scheduled for Tuesday, and only if I provided entertainment. The twins were their only grandchildren, yet they treated them like inconvenient visitors. Something shifted inside me in that moment. A lifetime of seeking approval, of making excuses for their behavior, of prioritizing their needs above my own. It all crumbled away, leaving clarity in its place. I showed Nurse Ramirez the text. "I think I'll take you up on those resources," I said quietly. "All of them." As the twins and I walked out of the hospital into the crisp autumn air, Ellie looked up at me with her father's earnest brown eyes. "Are we going to Grandma and Grandpa's house?" "No, sweetheart," I replied, feeling lighter despite the circumstances. "We're going to build our own support team, and it's going to be amazing." That evening, after tucking the twins into bed with extra kisses and reassurances that everything would be okay, I collapsed onto my sofa, the weight of the day finally crashing down on me. The modest 2-bedroom apartment we'd rented after moving to Boston felt both too small and too empty. Family photos lined the walls, constant reminders of what we'd lost and what we stood to lose. I ran my fingers over my favorite picture of Michael and me at Acadia National Park, taken just weeks before the accident that took him from us. His warm smile and steady presence had been my anchor for 9 years. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. We'd met during my final year of art school when his construction company was renovating the campus gallery. He'd asked thoughtful questions about my thesis exhibition, genuinely interested in my artistic process when most people just made polite small talk. Within a year, we were married, much to my parents' dismay. "He's just not our kind of people, Megan," my mother had said with that pinched look she reserved for disappointments. "No education, no family connections. What could he possibly offer you?" What Michael offered was unconditional love, something I'd never experienced from my own family. He believed in my artistic talent when my parents dismissed it as a hobby. He celebrated my small freelance design victories when they asked why I hadn't pursued something more substantial. With Michael, I never felt like I was failing to measure up. When the twins were born 4 years ago, my parents' reaction had been characteristically lukewarm. They visited once, complained about the small Portland apartment we were living in, and left early because the babies were too fussy. They sent expensive gifts occasionally, always with a note mentioning the cost, but showed little interest in actually knowing their grandchildren. After Michael's death, I'd moved us to Boston, partly to be closer to my parents, naively believing that tragedy might soften their hearts. The first few weeks seemed promising. They invited us for dinner twice. My father even played with the twins for a whole 15 minutes. My mother helped me find our apartment, though she repeatedly commented on how quaint and modest it was compared to what Ryan provided for his family. I'd been supporting my parents since their early retirement 3 years ago, when my father decided he'd had enough of corporate life at 62. They had savings, but not enough to maintain their accustomed lifestyle, especially after they purchased the Beacon Hill townhouse that my mother had coveted for years. When they mentioned their financial concerns, I'd immediately offered to help. Michael and I had been doing well, his construction business was thriving, and my freelance client list was growing. "Just temporarily," my father had said, "until our investments mature." That temporary arrangement had continued even after Michael died, and my own financial situation became precarious. Each month, I transferred $2,200 to their account before paying my own bills. Sometimes I had to take on extra design projects late into the night after the twins were asleep just to make rent. But I never complained or missed a payment. They were my parents, after all. Now, as I scrolled through my bank account on my phone, the regular transfer to my parents scheduled for tomorrow seemed absurd in light of the medical bills looming in my future. Cancer treatment wasn't cheap, even with insurance. There would be co-pays, medications, childcare costs, possibly unpaid time off when I was too sick to work. Every dollar would matter. My finger hovered over the cancel transfer button, but years of conditioning made me hesitate. The familiar whisper of guilt crept in. "They're counting on this money. They're your parents. It's your duty." But another voice, one that sounded remarkably like Michael's, countered, "Your children need that money now. You need that money. It's time to put yourself first." I closed the banking app without making a decision, too exhausted to face another emotional battle tonight. Instead, I opened my laptop and did what I always did when overwhelmed. I buried myself in work. 3 client projects needed attention, including a branding package for a local bakery that was due by the end of the week. Diving into creative work had always been my escape. Tonight, though, the colors blurred as tears filled my eyes, and my hands shook too much to create the precise lines my designs required. For the first time since Michael's death, I allowed myself to fully break down. Not the quiet tears I shed when the twins were asleep, but gut-wrenching sobs that came from the deepest part of me. I cried for Michael, for the life we'd planned. Together, that would never be. I cried for Ellie and Noah, who might lose their remaining parent. I cried for myself, for the cancer growing inside me, for the parents who saw me as a burden, for the years I'd spent seeking approval that would never come. When the storm finally passed, I felt hollow but somehow clearer. The digital clock on my laptop read 2:17 a.m. In just a few hours, the twins would wake up with their boundless energy, needing breakfast and love and reassurance. They deserved better than a mother too depleted to care for them properly. My phone buzzed with a text message. Who would be texting at this hour? It was from my brother Ryan. Just heard from Mom about your diagnosis. Sorry to hear that. Let me know if you need anything. Within reason, of course. Things are pretty hectic at the firm these days. Within reason. The caveat said everything. Ryan had always been my parents' perfect child. Harvard-educated, financially successful, married to Bethany, the daughter of one of my father's former colleagues. They had one child, a 7-year-old son named Preston who attended an exclusive private school. Ryan lived just 15 minutes from our parents in an upscale neighborhood, yet he visited them less frequently than I had when living 3,000 miles away in Portland. I didn't blame Ryan entirely. Our parents had pitted us against each other from an early age. Where I received criticism, he received praise. Where I got conditional love, he got adoration. He'd grown accustomed to his golden child status and worked hard to maintain it, which meant keeping a careful distance from my problems. I started to type a polite, non-committal response, then stopped myself. Why continue the charade? Instead, I wrote, I need someone to watch the twins during my first chemo treatment on Tuesday. Mom and Dad refused because they have a wine tasting. His response came quickly. That's unfortunate. Bethany and I have commitments all week. Preston has his sailing lessons on Tuesday afternoons, and I have court appearances. Have you looked into hiring help? No offer to reschedule. The sailing lessons. No suggestion that Bethany, who didn't work outside the home, might assist. Just a deflection that placed the responsibility firmly back on my shoulders. Thanks anyway, I replied, not bothering to hide my disappointment. I closed my laptop and walked quietly to the twins' bedroom, needing to see their peaceful sleeping faces. Noah was sprawled across his bed, one arm flung dramatically over his head just like Michael used to sleep. Ellie was curled into a tight ball, clutching her stuffed elephant. Their matching auburn curls, Michael's contribution to their genetic makeup, spread across their pillows. These beautiful children deserved a fighting chance to keep their mother. I deserved a fighting chance to see them grow up. And that meant making radical changes, starting now. I returned to the living room, reopened my banking app, and without further hesitation canceled the scheduled transfer to my parents. Then I went further, removing the recurring payment entirely from my account. The sense of relief was immediate and powerful, like putting down a heavy burden I'd carried for years. Next, I opened my email and wrote to my 3 most reliable clients, explaining my situation and letting them know I might need flexibility with deadlines during my treatment. It was terrifying to show vulnerability, to admit I couldn't handle everything perfectly, but also strangely liberating. Finally, I created a new document on my laptop titled Cancer Battle Plan. In it, I listed everything I would need to navigate the coming months: childcare during treatments and recovery days, meal preparation when I'm too sick to cook, transportation to and from medical appointments, financial resources and assistance. Programs, emotional support for myself and the twins. Looking at the list, I realized that for years I'd been giving what I most needed: support, compassion, financial help, to people who couldn't or wouldn't reciprocate. It was time to redirect those resources to where they were truly needed: my children and my health. As dawn broke over Boston, Painting the sky in soft pinks and golds outside my window, I made a promise to myself and to my sleeping children. This cancer might take my hair, my energy, and my strength for a time, but it would not take my dignity. My parents' rejection had broken something inside me, but in that brokenness, I found a resolution I'd never known I possessed. No more seeking approval from those who saw me as a burden. No more sacrificing my needs and my children's needs for people who gave nothing in return. No more financial support to those who refused emotional support when it mattered most. The road ahead would be difficult. But for the first time since the doctor had uttered the word cancer, I felt a spark of determination ignite within me. I would find a way through this, with or without my family's help. Most likely without. The morning after my diagnosis brought no reprieve. I awoke to the twins jumping on my bed, their energy a stark contrast to my exhaustion after a night of little sleep and emotional turmoil. I forced a smile for their sake, tucking away my fears behind the practiced mask of motherhood. "Pancakes, Mommy! You promised pancakes!" Noah reminded me, his face alight with the simple joy only a 4-year-old can possess. "With blueberry faces," Ellie added solemnly, as though this detail was of critical importance. And to her, it was. So I made pancakes with blueberry faces, poured apple juice into their favorite cups, and maintained the rhythm of our normal morning routine. Children thrive on consistency, the parenting books all said, especially children who have already experienced the seismic shift of losing a parent. I was determined to provide that stability for as long as possible, even as my own life tilted on its axis. As they ate, I checked my phone. 3 missed calls from my mother, a text from my father, and an email notification from the hospital, with pre-treatment instructions. I ignored my parents' attempts at contact, focusing instead on the medical information I would need to review later. After breakfast, I settled the twins with their toys in the living room while I made a crucial call to Nurse Ramirez. She answered on the second ring, her voice as warm and reassuring as it had been in person. "Megan, I'm glad you called. I've been thinking about your situation, and I have some additional resources that might help." For the next 20 minutes, she walked me through options I never knew existed. A local nonprofit called Healing Helpers provided free house cleaning services for cancer patients. Another organization offered meal delivery for families affected by cancer. The hospital had a partnership with a rideshare service to provide transportation to and from treatments. "And about the child care," she continued, "I spoke with Sarah at Cancer Care Companions. They have volunteers available for your first treatment day next Tuesday. Would you like me to connect you with her directly?" The relief was so intense I had to sit down. "Yes, please. That would be... yes." "Megan," Nurse Ramirez said gently, "I sense there's more going on with your family situation than you shared yesterday. Please remember that part of my job is connecting patients with all types of support, including counseling services if that would be helpful." The kindness in her voice nearly undid me. Here was a virtual stranger showing more concern for my well-being than my own parents. "Thank you," I managed. "I might take you up on that." After we hung up, I turned my attention to my parents' messages. My mother's voicemails escalated from irritation to manufactured concern. First message: "Megan, it's Mom. I don't appreciate you hanging up on me yesterday. Call me back." Second message: "Your father thinks I was perhaps a bit harsh yesterday. Call me so we can discuss alternative arrangements for the twins." Third message: "Megan Elizabeth Sullivan, this silent treatment is extremely immature. We're worried about you. Call us." My father's text was more direct. "Your mother is upset. The governor's ball is important for my connections with the retirement investment group. Surely you understand. Call her." No mention of my cancer. No acknowledgement of what I was facing. Just pressure to ease my mother's discomfort and respect my father's social obligations. The familiar weight of guilt began to settle on my shoulders, a burden I'd carried for as long as I could remember. How many times had I apologized for overreacting when my feelings were hurt? How often had I accepted blame to restore peace? The pattern was so ingrained it felt like breathing. But something had shifted. Perhaps it was the stark reality of facing my mortality, or maybe it was the fierce protective instinct for my children. Whatever the cause, I no longer felt compelled to shoulder responsibility for my parents' emotions. I drafted a simple text. I'm focusing on preparing for my treatment and caring for the twins. We'll be in touch when I'm ready. Then I blocked their numbers. The action was so contrary to my habitual people-pleasing that my hands shook afterward. I half expected lightning to strike or the phone to explode in protest. Neither happened. The world continued turning. The twins continued playing, and I felt an unexpected lightness. That lightness was short-lived. Shortly after lunch, the doorbell rang. I peered through the peephole to see my mother standing in the hallway, her mess scarf artfully arranged, her expression set in the determined look I knew all too well. For a moment, I considered not answering, but the twins had heard the bell and came running, excitement on their faces at the prospect of a visitor. I opened the door, bracing myself. "Finally," my mother said, brushing past me into the apartment. "Why aren't you answering your phone? We've been worried sick." The twins stopped short, their initial enthusiasm fading as they recognized their grandmother. They saw her rarely enough that she remained more stranger than family. "Hello, children," she said, with the stiff formality she always used with them. No hugs, no warmth, just a perfunctory acknowledgement of their existence. "Mom, this isn't a good time," I began. "Nonsense. There's never a good time for cancer, is there?" "That's why we need to be practical." She set her designer handbag on my coffee table, displacing the twins' coloring books. "Your father and I have discussed it, and we think you're being overly dramatic about this whole childcare situation." "Dramatic?" I echoed, disbelief washing over me. "Yes. My friend Diane's cousin went through breast cancer treatment last year, and she managed just fine. Hired a college student to help out occasionally. No need for all this fuss about us." Rearranging our schedules. I guided the twins back to their room, giving them a puzzle to work on before returning to face my mother. "The oncologist says my case is aggressive," I explained, keeping my voice low. "Grade 3, highly proliferative. The treatment will be intensive. I'll likely be extremely sick afterward." She waved a dismissive hand. "Everyone reacts differently. You've always been sensitive. Remember when you had your wisdom teeth out and acted like it was major surgery?" The comparison was so absurd I almost laughed. "Mom, this is cancer, not wisdom teeth." "I'm well aware, Megan, and I'm trying to help you approach this rationally rather than letting emotions cloud your judgment." She pulled out her phone and showed me a calendar app. "We can offer Thursday afternoons between 2 and 4 p.m. for the next month. That should align with some of your treatment schedule." I stared at her. This woman who had given birth to me, yet seemed incapable of basic maternal concern. "My first treatment is Tuesday. It can't be rescheduled." "Well, Tuesday is impossible for us. Your father has his investment group, and I have the wine tasting society. These are long-standing commitments." She said this as though explaining something obvious to a particularly slow child. "More important than your daughter's cancer treatment?" Her expression hardened. "Don't play the victim, Megan. It doesn't suit you. We all have challenges to overcome." The casual cruelty of her response crystallized something for me. This wasn't about schedules or commitments or even the governor's ball. It was about priorities. I had never been a priority for my parents. My cancer diagnosis hadn't changed that fundamental truth. "I've made other arrangements," I said quietly. She raised an eyebrow. "What arrangements?" "The hospital connected me with volunteers who help cancer patients with childcare during treatments." Volunteers? Strangers watching our grandchildren? Her voice rose sharply. What will people think? That we can't handle our own family matters? And there it was, her true concern. Not my health, not the twins' well-being, but appearances. What would her social circle think if they discovered her daughter was receiving charity? I don't care what people think, I replied. I care about getting through this treatment so I can be there for my children. This is about the money, isn't it? She asked suddenly. Your father noticed you didn't make this month's transfer. Is this some kind of punishment because we can't rearrange our entire lives for your convenience? The question was so breathtakingly self-centered that it momentarily robbed me of speech. My convenience. As if cancer was an inconvenient scheduling conflict rather than a life-threatening illness. I need that money for medical expenses and childcare, I said finally. You and Dad have assets. You can downsize, sell the boat, tap into your retirement accounts. After everything we've done for you. Her voice trembled with indignation. This is how you repay us? By abandoning us financially when we've come to depend on your support? What exactly have you done for me? I asked, the question emerging from some long-buried place inside me. When have you ever put my needs before your own? She recoiled, as if slapped. We gave you life. We provided for you. We paid for that art school nonsense even though we knew it was a waste of money. We attended your wedding to that contractor despite our reservations. Each statement was delivered like a gift I should be eternally grateful for. Basic parental obligations presented as extraordinary acts of generosity. And when Michael died? When I was a grieving widow with 2 toddlers? Where were you then? We helped you find this apartment, she countered defensively. You made 3 phone calls and complained about every place we looked at. The memories surfaced with painful clarity. You visited once after we moved in, stayed for 45 minutes, and left because the twins were too energetic. Children need discipline, Megan. You've always been too permissive with them. I took a deep breath, feeling strangely calm in the face of her criticism. I think you should leave now. We're not finished discussing this financial situation, she insisted. Yes, we are. I can't afford to support you anymore. Not financially and not emotionally. I need all my resources for my children and my health right now. She gathered, her handbag radiating righteous anger. Your father will be hearing about this. Don't expect us to bail you out when those medical bills start piling up. The irony of her threat was almost comical. They had never bailed me out of anything. It had always been the other way around. As she reached the door, she turned with one parting shot. When you come to your senses and realize you need us, don't expect us to drop everything. We have lives too, Megan. The door closed behind her with a decisive click. I stood motionless in the sudden silence, processing what had just happened. For the first time in my adult life, I had set a boundary with my mother and held firm. The expected tsunami of guilt didn't materialize. Instead, I felt an unfamiliar sense of self-respect blooming in my chest. From the bedroom doorway came a small voice. Mommy? Is Grandma mad at us? I turned to see Ellie watching me, her expression worried. Noah stood behind her, clutching his favorite stuffed dinosaur. I knelt down, opening my arms. They rushed into my embrace, seeking the reassurance children should never have to question. Grandma isn't mad at you, I said firmly. Grown-ups sometimes have disagreements, but it has nothing to do with you. I love you both more than anything in the world. More than the moon? Noah asked, our familiar bedtime exchange. More than the moon, the stars, and all the planets combined, I answered, kissing the top of his head. As I held my children close, I realized that the heaviest burden I'd been carrying wasn't cancer. It was the weight of seeking approval and love from people constitutionally incapable of giving it freely. That burden, at least, I could choose to set down. The weekend following my mother's visit passed in a blur of preparation. I transformed our small apartment into a fortress of organization. Meal plans posted on the refrigerator, medication, schedules printed and laminated, emergency contact lists updated. If I couldn't control the cancer invading my body, I could at least control how I prepared to fight it. The twins sensed the shift in our household, despite my efforts to maintain normalcy. They clung a little tighter, asked for one more bedtime story, watched me with solemn eyes when they thought I wasn't looking. Children are remarkably perceptive, especially to a parent's distress. On Monday afternoon, I received a call from Sarah at Cancer Care Companions, confirming that a volunteer named Katie would arrive at our apartment at 7:30 the next morning to watch the twins during my first chemotherapy session. Katie is wonderful with children, Sarah assured me. She's been volunteering with us for 3 years and has extensive experience with preschool-aged kids. She's also undergone a background check and is CPR certified. The logistics were falling into place, but anxiety still gnawed at me. Leaving my children with a stranger, no matter how qualified, felt wrong. Yet, what choice did I have? My parents had made their position clear. My brother had his commitments. My friends from Portland were 3,000 miles away, and I hadn't been in Boston long enough to build a local support network. That evening, as I tucked the twins into bed, I tried to explain what would happen the next day. "Tomorrow, Mommy has to go to the hospital for some special medicine," I said, keeping my voice light. "A nice lady named Katie is going to stay with you while I'm gone." "Why can't we come too?" Noah asked, his lower lip trembling slightly. "The hospital isn't very fun for kids," I explained. "Lots of waiting in boring rooms, but Katie is bringing some really cool games to play here." "Is your medicine because you're sick?" Ellie asked, her perceptiveness catching me off guard. I'd consulted with Dr. Patel about how much to tell them. She'd advised honesty, but in age-appropriate terms. "Yes, sweetie. Mommy has something called cancer in her body. The medicine will help fight it, but it might make me feel tired for a while." "Like when I had strep throat?" Noah asked, searching for something familiar to relate to. "Kind of like that, yes." "Will you get better?" Ellie's question hung in the air, heavy with implications a 4-year-old shouldn't have to contemplate. "The doctors are going to do everything they can to make me better," I promised, choosing my words carefully. "And I'm going to fight really hard." They seemed satisfied with this answer, their young minds unable to fully grasp the gravity of the situation. In some ways, their innocence was a blessing. "Can we make you cards for when you get home?" Ellie suggested, always the nurturer. "That would be perfect," I said, blinking back tears. After they fell asleep, I called my friend Tamara in Portland, one of the few people outside the medical team who knew about my diagnosis. "How are you holding up?" she asked, concern evident in her voice. "Honestly, I'm terrified," I admitted. "Not just about the cancer, but about what happens to the twins if things don't go well." Tamara and I had met in a new mothers group after the twins were born. She had twins too, just 3 months older than Ellie and Noah. We'd bonded over the unique challenges of raising 2 babies simultaneously. When Michael died, she'd been my rock, bringing meals, offering childcare, sitting with me through the darkest nights. "Have you thought about updating your will?" she asked gently. "It's on my list," I sighed. "But it means confronting possibilities I'm not ready to face." "I know," she said softly. "But Megan, you need to name guardians, especially given your parents' situation." The thought of my children being raised by my parents sent a chill through me. They would grow up feeling like burdens, forever, trying to earn love that should be freely given. "Would you and Dave consider being named as guardians?" I asked suddenly. "If something happens to me?" The question had emerged without premeditation, but as soon as I said it, I knew it was. Right. Tamara and Dave were warm, loving parents. Their twins, Zach and Emma, were already like cousins to Ellie and Noah. "Oh, Megan," Tamara's voice cracked. "Yes, of course we would. But it's not going to come to that. You're going to beat this." "I hope so," I whispered. "But knowing they'd be loved if I can't be here, that means everything." We talked for another hour, about treatments, about practical matters, about the life I'd left behind in Portland. When we finally said goodnight, I felt marginally better. At least one critical piece had fallen into place. Morning arrived. Too quickly. I woke before dawn, a knot of dread in my stomach. Today was the day I officially became a cancer patient. Today, I would put toxic chemicals into my body to kill the disease that threatened to take me from my children. Katie arrived. Precisely at 7:30, her cheerful efficiency immediately reassuring. She was in her mid-30s with kind eyes and practical clothes, carrying a large tote bag filled with games and activities. "You must be Megan," she said, offering a warm handshake. "And these must be Ellie and Noah." The twins regarded her cautiously from behind my legs. Stranger anxiety had intensified since Michael's death, another manifestation of their fear of loss. "I brought something special," Katie said, kneeling to their level. She pulled out 2 identical stuffed bears wearing tiny backpacks. "These are brave bears. They go with kids when their grown-ups need extra special medicine. Would you like to hold them?" The twins accepted the bears with solemn nods. Katie explained that the backpacks contained courage stones they could hold if they felt scared, and tiny notebooks where they could draw pictures of their feelings. "My own children had brave bears when I was sick," Katie explained quietly to me as the twins examined their new treasures. "I had breast cancer 5 years ago. That's why I volunteer. I remember how hard it was to focus on healing when I was worried about my kids." A wave of emotion hit me. "You're a survivor," I whispered. "I am," she confirmed, "and you will be too." Those 4 words, spoken with such conviction by someone who had walked this path before me, gave me strength I didn't know I needed. The twins' goodbye hugs were almost my undoing. I promised to bring them a treat from the hospital gift shop and assured them I'd be back before dinner. Their brave little faces as they waved from the window hollowed out something inside me. The hospital oncology department was busy even at 8:30 in the morning. Patients of all ages filled the waiting room, some visibly ill, others showing no outward signs of the battle raging within their bodies. I checked in and was directed to a small cubicle where a nurse reviewed my treatment plan. "Dr. Patel ordered a standard ECT regimen," she explained. "Today you'll receive the EC portion, epirubicin and cyclophosphamide. You'll have 4 EC treatments once every 3 weeks, followed by 4 Taxol treatments on the same schedule. The entire course will take about 5 months. 5 months. The time frame stretched before me like an eternity. The twins' 5th birthday would happen during treatment. Their first day of kindergarten might coincide with my final sessions. "And the side effects?" I asked, though Dr. Patel had already warned me what to expect. Hair loss usually begins within 2 to 3 weeks. Nausea, fatigue, decreased blood counts are common. We'll give you medications to help manage the symptoms." She paused, noticing my expression. "It's a lot to take in, I know." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. A text from my father. "Your mother is extremely upset. This financial tantrum needs to stop. The club dues are due next week." The sheer audacity left me speechless. I was sitting in an oncology ward, about to have poison pumped into my veins to fight for my life, and my father was concerned about country club dues. The nurse noticed my distress. "Is everything okay?" "Family issues," I managed, echoing my response to Dr. Patel days earlier. But this time I elaborated. "My parents refuse to help with my children during treatment because they have a wine tasting. They're more concerned about their country club membership than my cancer. Saying it aloud, to a stranger no less, was oddly liberating. The nurse's expression shifted from professional compassion to genuine empathy. Unfortunately, I've seen that more often than you might think, she said quietly. Cancer reveals people's true colors. Sometimes the people you expect to step up don't, and help comes from unexpected places instead. As if on cue, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a photo from Katie, the twins painting cheerful pictures. At the kitchen table, their brave bears propped up watching. The simple normalcy of the image brought tears to my eyes. See? The nurse said gently. Help from unexpected places. I was moved to a treatment chair where another nurse inserted my IV line. The medication would take about an hour to administer, she explained, and I should try to relax as much as possible. Easier said than done. Just as the first drops of chemotherapy began to flow into my veins, the treatment room door burst open. My mother swept in, designer handbag swinging, my father 2 steps behind her. Megan Elizabeth Sullivan, she announced loudly, causing every head in the room to turn. This has gone far enough. I froze, mortified by the public intrusion into this already difficult moment. The nurse administering my treatment stepped protectively closer to my chair. Ma'am, you need to lower your voice, she said firmly. This is a treatment area. My mother ignored her, focusing her laser-like attention on me. We drove to your apartment to talk sense into you, and found some strange woman there with the children. She refused to let us take them, claimed she had authorized guardian paperwork from you. What is the meaning of this? My father stood awkwardly behind her, looking uncomfortable with the public spectacle but making no move to rein her in. I left instructions that only Katie is authorized to watch the twins today, I said, keeping my voice deliberately calm, despite the adrenaline surging through me. We are their grandparents, my mother hissed. We don't need authorization. Actually, you do, I replied. And this isn't the time or place for this discussion. If you'd answer your phone, we wouldn't need to track you down like this, my father interjected, as though their behavior was somehow my fault. The charge nurse approached, her expression leaving no room for argument. I need to ask you both to leave immediately. We have patients here with compromised immune systems. If you don't leave voluntarily, I'll call security. My mother drew herself up indignantly. Do you know who we are? My husband is… Mom, I interrupted, a lifetime of conditioning crumbling in an instant. I don't care who you are. I don't care about the wine tasting or the governor's ball, or the country club dues. Right now, I'm fighting for my life, and you're creating a scene in the one place I need peace. Please leave. My father's face reddened. After everything we've done for you, what exactly have you done? The question emerged louder than I intended, fueled by fear and grief and years of accumulated hurt. When have you ever put my needs first? When have you ever shown up for me when it wasn't convenient for you? The treatment room had gone silent, other patients and staff bearing witness to the implosion of my family facade. We gave you life, my mother said, falling back on her standard retort. And now I'm fighting to keep it, I replied, gesturing to the IV in my arm. Without your help. The charge nurse stepped between us. Her professional demeanor masking barely contained anger. That's enough. Security has been called. I suggest you leave before they arrive. My mother's face contorted, with indignation, but something in the nurse's expression must have gotten through to her. She gripped my father's arm. Come, Robert. We're clearly not wanted here. The monthly transfer, my father began, but my mother tugged him toward the door. We'll discuss that later, she hissed, her embarrassment at being publicly confronted, finally outweighing her determination to make demands. As they left, my father glanced back, his expression a complex mixture of anger and something else, perhaps a flicker of shame. But he said nothing, following my mother out of the treatment room without another word. The silence that followed their departure was deafening. I became acutely aware of the other patients watching me, their faces reflecting sympathy, secondhand, embarrassment, and in some cases, knowing recognition. How many of them had discovered, as I was discovering, that illness revealed the true nature of relationships? "I'm so sorry about that," I said to no one in particular, feeling my face flush with humiliation. The woman in the next chair reached over and patted my hand. "Honey, my ex-husband sent me divorce papers while I was having my port inserted. You've got nothing to apologize for." A ripple of subdued laughter broke the tension, and gradually the treatment room returned to its previous state of quiet activity. The nurse adjusted my IV, checking that the disruption hadn't affected the flow of medication. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. I wasn't sure how to answer. Physically, the chemotherapy hadn't yet triggered any adverse reactions. Emotionally, I felt like I'd been through a hurricane. But beneath the turmoil was something unexpected, a sense of clarity. "I think I will be," I replied. As the medication continued to drip into my veins, I pulled out my phone and sent a text to Katie. "Are the twins okay? My parents didn't upset them, did they?" Her response came quickly. "They're fine. Your parents didn't get past the front door. The twins are making you recovery cards and haven't mentioned the incident." Relief washed over me. At least my children had been spared the ugliness of that confrontation. I spent the rest of my treatment time making notes on my phone. Practical, actionable items that needed immediate attention. Contact a lawyer about formally designating Tamara and Dave as the twins' guardians in case the worst happened. Change. The locks on my apartment. Inform the twins' preschool that my parents were not authorized to pick them up under any circumstances. Close any remaining joint accounts I might still have with my parents from my college days. Redirect the automatic payments I'd been making to my parents to a dedicated medical expense account instead. Each decision felt radical, yet necessary. My parents had shown me exactly who they were, not just today, but consistently throughout my life. I'd simply been too conditioned to accept their behavior as normal to recognize it. After my treatment was complete, the nurse provided detailed instructions for managing side effects. "The first 48 hours are often the most challenging," she explained. "The anti-nausea medication should help, but you'll likely feel extremely fatigued. Do you have someone who can stay with you tonight?" I thought of Katie, who had already given so much of her day. "I'll be all right. The twins are pretty self-sufficient for their age." The nurse frowned. "Megan, you shouldn't be alone with small children tonight. The side effects can come on suddenly and be quite severe." Before I could respond, my phone rang. An unknown. "Local number," I answered cautiously. "Megan, this is Diana from the Cancer Support Group at Boston Memorial." Her voice was warm, with a slight southern accent. "Nurse Chen mentioned you might need some backup tonight after your first treatment. I'm a night volunteer with the Overnight Angels program." The hospital must have made arrangements without telling me. Part of me bristled at the presumption, but a larger part was simply grateful. "What's the Overnight Angels program?" I asked. "We're cancer survivors who stay overnight with patients after their first few treatments, especially those with young children or who live alone. I bring dinner, help with bedtime routines, and stay alert while you rest. I've been through ECT treatment myself, so I know exactly what you're facing." I hesitated. Letting a stranger into our home overnight was a big step. Yet I'd just witnessed how the people I'd known my entire life could betray my trust, while strangers had shown me nothing but kindness. "That would be really helpful," I admitted finally. "Thank you." Diana arranged to meet me at my apartment at 4:30, giving me time to get home and settle in before the side effects potentially hit. The nurse seemed satisfied with this plan and completed my discharge process. As I gathered my belongings, the woman from the next chair, the one whose ex-husband had served her divorce papers, handed me a business card. "I run a support group for single parents with cancer," she explained. "We meet Thursdays at the community center on Maple Street. If you need people who actually understand what you're going through, we're there." Her name was Pauline, and something in her direct gaze told me she'd walked miles in shoes similar to mine. I thanked her and tucked the card into my wallet. The hospital provided transportation home, another service I hadn't known existed until today. The driver, an older gentleman named Hector, shared that his wife had survived breast cancer 15 years earlier. "Toughest fighter I ever met," he said proudly. "She's running marathons now at 68. Every cancer survivor story felt like a lifeline, a promise that there could be an after to this current nightmare. When I arrived home, Katie and the twins had transformed our small living room into a welcome party. A hand-painted banner proclaimed, "We love you, Mommy," in wobbly preschool lettering. The twins had made dozens of cards, each one covered in hearts, rainbows, and stick figures of our family. "Surprise!" they shouted in unison when I walked through the door. Their excitement was tempered with careful gentleness, as though they instinctively understood I was fragile today. Katie had prepared a simple lunch that appealed to both adult and preschool palates. As we ate, she quietly explained what had happened with my parents. "They demanded I let them take the twins to their house," she said, keeping her voice low so the children wouldn't hear. "When I explained I was only authorized to care for them here, your mother became unpleasant. Your father tried to offer me money to look the other way while they took the kids." My appetite vanished. "I'm so sorry you had to deal with that." Katie shook her head. "Don't apologize. Unfortunately, it's not uncommon in my volunteer work. Family dynamics can get complicated around serious illness." She hesitated before adding, "I hope you don't mind, but I called our organization's legal counselor after they left. She suggested you might want to consider a temporary restraining order, given their attempt to remove the children against your wishes. A restraining order against my own parents." The suggestion should have felt extreme, but after their behavior at the hospital, it seemed like a reasonable precaution. "I'll think about it," I promised. And I would, once I had the energy to process one more emotional upheaval. Katie stayed until Diana arrived, ensuring a smooth transition. The twins were initially wary of another stranger in our home, but Diana won them over with her gentle humor and a small gift. Matching constellation. Nightlights for their bedroom. "The stars kept me company during my toughest nights," she told them. "Now they can watch over you, too." As evening approached, the first wave of post-chemo nausea hit me, followed by a bone-deep fatigue unlike anything I'd experienced before. Diana smoothly took over, preparing dinner for the twins while I huddled under a blanket on the couch, simultaneously fighting nausea and the despair that threatened to engulf me. "Is this what the next 5 months will be like?" I asked Diana, when she brought me anti-nausea medication and ginger tea. "It gets manageable," she replied honestly. "Not easier exactly, but you develop routines. Your body learns what to expect, and you discover reserves of strength you never knew you had." She helped me to bed after the twins were asleep, promising to check on me hourly and handle any nighttime wake-ups from the children. As I drifted in and out of uneasy sleep, fragments of the day replayed in my mind. My parents' intrusion, at the hospital, the kindness of strangers, the twins' carefully made welcome signs. In the hazy space between wakefulness and dreaming, a moment of perfect clarity arrived. The gulf between how my parents had treated me and how I wanted to treat my own children was unbridgeable. I could continue seeking their approval, their help, their love. Or I could put all that wasted energy into fighting cancer and creating a stable, loving environment for my children. Not much of a choice, really. In the darkness of that first chemotherapy night, As poison coursed through my veins to fight the disease threatening to take me from my children, I made my decision. I would cut the cord that bound me to people, who saw me only as a source of financial support and an occasional social obligation. I would build a new support system from the unexpected kindness I'd encountered. I would fight, not just cancer, but the lifelong pattern of seeking validation from those incapable of giving it. The realization didn't eliminate the nausea or the fear or the uncertainty, but it provided a clarity of purpose that felt like the first deep breath after years of drowning. When morning came, bringing with it a new wave of side effects, but also the twins' eager faces and Diana's steady presence, I knew with absolute certainty that I had made the right choice. The path ahead would be difficult, perhaps the most difficult journey of my life. But for the first time, I wasn't walking it in the shadow of expectations I could never meet. I was walking it as myself, for myself, and for the two small people who deserved a mother who valued herself enough to demand respect. The days following my first chemotherapy treatment unfolded in a blur of physical discomfort and logistical arrangements. Diana stayed for 2 nights, her quiet competence a lifeline as I navigated waves of nausea and bone-crushing fatigue. By the 3rd day, I felt well enough to resume some semblance of normal activity, though normal had taken on an entirely new meaning. The twins adjusted to our new reality with the remarkable resilience of children. They became experts at what they called mommy's quiet time, entertaining themselves with puzzles and picture books when my energy flagged. They took pride in fetching my water bottle or tucking a blanket around me when I rested on the couch. Their instinctive caregiving both warmed my heart and filled me with determination to shield them from bearing too much responsibility at such a young age. True to my decision, I began systematically severing financial and practical ties with my parents. I closed the joint checking account that had remained open since my college days. I redirected the monthly transfer that had been going to their account into a dedicated medical expense fund. I changed the locks on our apartment and informed the building manager that my parents were not to be given access under any circumstances. The lawyer I consulted, a no-nonsense woman named Harriet Winters who specialized in family law, helped me draft formal guardianship paperwork naming Tamara and Dave as the twins' caregivers should anything happen to me. "What about your parents?" she asked during our first meeting. As grandparents, they could potentially contest this arrangement. I explained the situation, their refusal to help during my treatment, their attempt to take the twins against my authorization, their prioritization of social events over my health crisis. "I see," Harriet said, making notes. "In that case, I recommend we include an affidavit explaining why they are unsuitable guardians. Specific incidents, dates, and witnesses would strengthen our position." The clinical documentation of my parents' failures felt simultaneously vindictive and necessary. I didn't want to punish them. I simply needed to protect my children from the emotional neglect I'd experienced throughout my life. "What about a restraining order?" I asked, remembering Katie's suggestion. Harriet considered this carefully. "Based on what you've described, their behavior doesn't quite rise to the legal threshold required for a restraining order. However, we can send them a formal cease and desist letter regarding attempted unauthorized removal of the children. That creates a paper trail if their behavior escalates." I agreed to this approach, hoping it would be sufficient to keep my parents at bay without further inflaming the situation. Of course, my parents didn't accept these changes quietly. The backlash began with a barrage of voicemails and texts, escalating in tone from irritation to indignation to manufactured concern. "Megan, this childish silent treatment is completely inappropriate," my mother's first message began. "Call us immediately to discuss the financial situation." By the 10th message, her tactics had shifted. "We're worried sick about you and the children. This isn't like you. We fear the cancer treatments are affecting your judgment." My father's messages were more direct. "The mortgage payment is due next week. We're counting on your contribution. Don't let this medical situation disrupt our arrangements. When I didn't respond to any of these messages, they escalated to involving other family members. My Aunt Patricia, my mother's younger sister, called on their behalf. "Maggie, what's going on?" she asked, using my childhood nickname. "Your parents are beside themselves with worry. They say you've cut them off financially and won't let them see the twins." I'd always been fond of Aunt Patricia, who had shown me more genuine affection in sporadic visits than my mother had throughout my childhood. Still, I knew where her loyalties ultimately lay. Did they mention that they refused to watch the twins during my cancer treatment because they had a wine tasting? I asked quietly. A pause. "They said you were being unreasonable about scheduling, that you expected them to drop everything on short notice." "I asked them 2 weeks in advance, Aunt Patricia, and it wasn't for a spa day. It was for chemotherapy." Another, longer pause. "I see." Her voice had cooled several degrees. "And the financial situation?" "I've been sending them $2,200 every month for the past 3 years. Money I could barely afford after Michael died. Now I need those funds for medical expenses and childcare during my treatment." "They said you promised to help with their retirement," she countered, though with noticeably less conviction. "I offered to help temporarily when they retired early. Somehow that morphed into a permanent obligation. They have assets they could liquidate. I have cancer and 2 4-year-olds depending on me." The conversation ended awkwardly, with Aunt Patricia promising to talk to them about the situation. I doubted it would make any difference. My parents had always excelled at presenting themselves as victims of others' unreasonable behavior rather than acknowledging their own shortcomings. Their next move proved I was right to be skeptical. 5 days after my first treatment, as I was beginning to feel marginally human again, a knock came at my apartment door. I peered through the peephole to see my brother Ryan standing in the hallway, his expression set in the professionally concerned look he probably used with difficult clients. For a moment, I considered not answering. But Ryan, unlike our parents, had never been actively cruel, just passively absent when support was needed. I opened the door partway, leaving the security chain engaged. "Ryan," I greeted him neutrally. "This is unexpected." He shifted uncomfortably, adjusting his designer tie. "Can I come in? We need to talk." I hesitated, then unhooked the chain. The twins were at preschool, and I felt physically capable of handling whatever agenda had brought him to my door. Ryan entered, glancing around my modest apartment with barely concealed judgment. As always, he was impeccably dressed in what I recognized as an expensive suit, his Harvard Law School cufflinks prominently displayed. "Mom and Dad are pretty upset," he began without preamble. "I imagine they are," I replied, gesturing for him to sit at the small dining table while I remained standing. A subtle power play I'd learned from watching him in action over the years. "They said you've cut them off financially without warning. Dad says they might lose the house." "They won't lose the house, Ryan. They have options. They can downsize, sell the boat, liquidate some investments. They just don't want to adjust their lifestyle." He frowned. "Still, you made a commitment to them. They planned their retirement around your support." "A temporary commitment that somehow became permanent," I corrected. "And now I have cancer. My priorities have to be my medical treatment and caring for the twins." "About that," he said, his expression softening artificially. "Mom and Dad are concerned about your ability to care for the children during treatment. They think the twins would be better off staying with them until you're well." The audacity was breathtaking. The same parents who couldn't be bothered to watch them for a few hours during my treatment because they had a wine tasting, Ryan, had the grace to look uncomfortable. They admit they mishandled that situation. They were caught off guard by your diagnosis. "Is that what they told you?" "Because I informed them 2 weeks before my treatment date. They chose the governor's ball and a wine tasting over helping their daughter during cancer treatment." Megan, be reasonable. They're not young anymore. Taking care of preschool-age twins is a lot to ask. I wasn't asking them to raise my children, just to watch them for a few hours while I received treatment that might save my life, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. And now they want custody? Not custody, Ryan backpedaled. Just temporary care during your treatment. They're worried about the twins being exposed to strangers through these volunteer services you're using. I laughed without humor. The twins see our parents 3 or 4 times a year, usually for less than an hour. The strangers from the cancer support services have shown more genuine concern for their well-being in a week than Mom and Dad have in their entire lives. Ryan's expression hardened. The veneer of familial concern slipped, revealing the attorney underneath. They've asked me to look into their legal options. As grandparents, they may have rights. Go ahead, I said, suddenly exhausted by the conversation. My lawyer has already prepared documentation of their complete disinterest in the twins' lives, their refusal to help during my medical crisis, and their attempt to take the children against my authorization. She's also gathering testimonials from the hospital staff who witnessed their behavior during my treatment. That caught him off guard. Ryan had always underestimated me, seeing only the artistic sister who didn't follow the family's expected path to corporate or legal success. You have a lawyer? He asked, his tone suggesting this was an overreaction. Harriet Winters, I confirmed. Perhaps you know her? She specializes in family law and has quite a reputation for protecting vulnerable parents from exploitative relatives. I was bluffing slightly. Harriet was competent but not the legal powerhouse I was implying. Still, the name drop had its intended effect. Ryan's confident demeanor faltered. This doesn't need to become adversarial, he said, backtracking. We're family. Are we? I asked quietly. Because family supports each other during crisis. Family shows up, family doesn't demand money from someone fighting cancer. Ryan looked away, unable to meet my gaze. For a brief moment, I glimpsed what might have been shame beneath his polished exterior. We'd both been shaped by our parents' conditional love, just in different ways. Where I had spent my life seeking approval I never received, Ryan had contorted himself to fit their expectations, sacrificing authenticity for acceptance. You should go, I said, suddenly aware that my limited energy was draining rapidly. Tell Mom and Dad whatever you want, but the answer is no. No to financial support, no to any custody arrangement, no to their attempts to control me through guilt and manipulation. He stood, straightening his jacket with an automatic gesture. They won't accept this, you know. Mom, especially. That's not my problem anymore, I replied. As I showed him to the door, a wave of dizziness washed over me, a reminder that regardless of family drama, my body was engaged in a different kind of battle. Ryan noticed my sudden pallor. Are you okay? He asked, and for the first time there seemed to be genuine concern in his voice. Just side effects from the chemo, I said, steadying myself against the wall. I'll be fine. He hesitated, his hand on the doorknob. Do you need anything? The question surprised me. In all our adult interactions, Ryan had never offered help of any kind. Nothing you're willing to give, I answered honestly. Something flickered across his face, regret perhaps, or recognition. But the moment passed quickly, and he nodded a curt goodbye before leaving. I sank onto the couch after he left, emotionally drained from the confrontation. My phone buzzed with a text from Diana, checking in as she had done daily since my treatment. Rough day? She asked, somehow intuiting my state from thousands of miles away. Family ambush, I replied. The usual demands and guilt tactics. Her response came quickly. Remember, your boundaries are not just for you, they're for the twins too. Stay strong. As I rested before picking up the children from preschool, I reflected on how the landscape of my life had shifted so dramatically in just a week. The people I'd been conditioned to depend on had revealed themselves as unreliable and self-serving, while virtual strangers had stepped forward with genuine support and practical help. The hardest part wasn't dealing with my parents' resistance to my newfound boundaries. It was confronting the years I'd wasted seeking their approval and acceptance. All that energy could have been directed toward building authentic relationships, instead of trying to earn conditional love from people constitutionally incapable of giving it. Cancer had stripped away the comfortable illusions I'd maintained about my family. The clarity was painful, but necessary. Like the chemotherapy destroying both cancerous and healthy cells in my body. This process of breaking ties was brutal, but potentially life-saving. When I picked up the twins that afternoon, their excited chatter about preschool adventures grounded me in what truly mattered. Their resilience in the face of so much loss and change was my inspiration. If these tiny humans could adapt to losing their father and then facing their mother's illness with such courage, surely I could withstand whatever pressure my parents and brother might exert. That evening, as we built a blanket fort in the living room, an activity that allowed me to rest while still engaging with the children, Noah looked up from his coloring book with a solemn expression. "Mommy, are Grandma and Grandpa mad at—" The question caught me off guard. "Why do you ask that, sweetie?" "They came to our house but didn't come in to see us," he explained. "And the lady who watched us didn't let them take us to their house." I chose my words carefully, mindful of how children interpret adult conflicts. Grandma and Grandpa and... I have some grown-up disagreements right now, but those have nothing to do with you or Ellie. They aren't mad at you. "Are they mad at you because you're sick?" Ellie asked, always perceptive beyond her years. "No, honey. They're upset about other things, grown-up things that are hard to explain." Ellie considered this, then nodded decisively. "They're not being very nice. When Sam at school was sick, his grandma came and made him soup and read him stories. Out of the mouths of babes." Even a 4-year-old could recognize the fundamental disconnect between how grandparents should behave and how mine actually did. "Some grandparents show love in different ways," I said diplomatically, though the words felt hollow even to me. "I don't think they know how to love right," Noah declared with the brutal honesty of childhood. I couldn't argue with his assessment. Instead, I pulled my children close, inhaling the scent of preschool paint and playground sunshine that clung to their hair. "Well, I know how to love right," I told them, "and I love you both more than all the stars in the sky." "More than all the dinosaurs that ever lived?" Noah asked, our familiar bedtime exchange. "Even more than that," I assured him. As they drifted to sleep that night, their small bodies curled trustingly against mine in our blanket fort, we'd decided to have a special sleepover in the living room. I made a silent promise to them and to myself. No matter what challenges my parents might throw our way, no matter how difficult my treatment became, I would protect this precious bubble of genuine love we'd created. Some battles weren't worth fighting. But this one, the battle for my dignity, my children's emotional well-being, and our collective future, this was a battle I would win, even on my weakest days. 2 weeks after my first chemotherapy treatment, I stood in the bathroom, staring at my reflection as clumps of hair collected in my hands. The oncologist had warned me this would happen, but the reality was still jarring. My auburn hair, so, like the twins, had been a defining feature throughout my life, often the one physical attribute my mother had complimented. I took a deep breath and reached for the electric clippers I'd purchased in preparation for this moment. Better to take control of the process than watch it happen in patches. Just as I was about to begin, a gentle knock came at the bathroom door. "Megan, it's Pauline. I brought reinforcements." Pauline from the cancer support group had quickly become a central figure in my new support system. After attending my first meeting the previous week, I'd connected instantly with her no-nonsense approach to cancer and single parenthood. When I'd mentioned the hair loss beginning, she'd immediately offered to come over. I opened the door to find Pauline flanked by two other women from the support group, Tanya, a vivacious kindergarten teacher with colorectal cancer, and Beth, a quiet accountant who had recently completed treatment for lymphoma. All three women carried tote bags and wore matching t-shirts that read "Cancer Warriors" across the front. "Hair party," Tanya announced with forced cheer that somehow didn't feel patronizing. We brought supplies. The supplies turned out to include several stylish headscarves, a selection of soft sleep caps, 2 different types of wig adhesive, fancy chocolates, and a bottle of non-alcoholic sparkling cider. "I hope the twins are okay with visitors," Beth said, her voice soft but warm. "We thought this might be easier with moral support." The thoughtfulness brought tears to my eyes. These women, who had their own battles to fight, had shown up for a relative stranger because they understood exactly what I was facing. "The twins are napping," I managed. Thank you." Pauline squeezed my shoulder. "No one should do this alone. It's a rite of passage for us cancer folks, but it doesn't mean it's easy." They set up what Tanya called a salon station on my small balcony, complete with a hand mirror, the clippers, and various styling products. "Options," Pauline explained. "You can go full buzz cut, try a pixie style first, or we can do a mohawk for fun before taking it all off. Your choice." The offhand way she presented these alternatives made what had felt like a traumatic loss suddenly seem more like a makeover adventure. "What did you do?" I asked her. "Mohawk," she grinned. "Took pictures for my kids. They thought it was hilarious, which made the whole thing less scary for them." That decided it. "Mohawk first, then buzz cut," I said. "The twins should be up soon. They might need to see me having fun with this before the big change." As Pauline expertly worked the clippers, Tanya poured glasses of sparkling cider and Beth arranged the headscarves by color. They shared their own hair loss stories, turning what could have been a moment of grief into something approaching a celebration. "My son called me alien mom for 3 months, Tanya laughed. "He thought it was the coolest thing ever." "My accounting clients didn't even recognize me," Beth added. "I got to hear what they really thought about their previous accountant, which was apparently me." By the time the twins woke up and wandered onto the balcony, I was sporting a purple-tinted mohawk, courtesy of some temporary color spray Tanya had brought, and feeling more empowered than I had in weeks. Ellie's eyes widened to saucers. "Mommy, your hair!" Noah's response was immediate and enthusiastic. "Awesome! Can I have a mohawk too?" And just like that, what could have been traumatic became an adventure. Noah received a temporary mohawk using styling gel, while Ellie opted for purple streaks to match mine. We took dozens of photos, laughing as we tried on different looks. When it came time for the final buzz cut, the twins watched solemnly as the last of my hair fell away. Ellie reached out to touch my newly bare head. "It feels like Daddy's face when he didn't shave," she observed. The simple, innocent comparison to Michael brought a lump to my throat. "Does it look okay?" I asked. "Them. You look like a warrior," Noah declared confidently, a phrase he'd obviously picked up from our visitors' t-shirts. "The strongest, bravest warrior," Ellie agreed. After the twins returned to their play, Pauline helped me try on the various headscarves while Tanya cleaned up the hair clippings and Beth prepared a simple dinner for all of us. "How are you doing with everything else?" Pauline asked quietly. "Your parents still causing trouble?" I sighed. "They've been quieter since my brother's visit, but I doubt that will last. The lawyer sent them the cease and desist letter yesterday." "Good," she nodded approvingly. "Boundaries are essential during treatment. You need every ounce of energy for healing, not dealing with toxic family dynamics." "I still feel guilty sometimes," I admitted, "like I'm being a bad daughter." "You know what's interesting?" Tanya interjected, overhearing our conversation. "Cancer patients are the only people expected to manage everyone else's feelings about their illness. Can you imagine someone with a broken leg being told they're a bad child for not helping their parents move furniture? Her analogy made me laugh despite myself. When you put it that way. Exactly, Beth agreed, joining us. My therapist calls it the emotional labor of illness. It's exhausting and completely unfair. As we shared dinner and conversation, I realized how much I'd been missing this kind of connection. Since moving to Boston, I'd been so focused on establishing our new life and supporting my parents that I'd neglected to build friendships of my own. Now, faced with the fight of my life, these women had stepped into the void with practical help and emotional understanding that my biological family couldn't or wouldn't provide. Over the following weeks, my support network expanded in ways I could never have anticipated. Sarah from Cancer Care Companions coordinated a rotating schedule of volunteers to help with the twins during my treatment days. Pauline introduced me to other members of the Single Parents with Cancer group, creating a text thread where we could share resources, vent frustrations, or simply check in with people who truly understood. Diana continued to stay overnight after each treatment, her calm presence a balm during the worst of the side effects. She brought homemade bone broth that somehow stayed down when nothing else would, and taught me small energy conservation tricks she'd learned during her own treatment. Cancer is a full-time job, she observed one evening as she helped me organize my medication schedule. But it doesn't have to be a solitary one. Even my neighbors, whom I'd barely known beyond polite, nods in the hallway, began to offer assistance once word spread about my diagnosis. Mrs. Abernathy from apartment 3B, a retired elementary school teacher, volunteered to walk the twins to and from preschool on days when I was too fatigued. Mr. Chen from across the hall left containers of his wife's healing soup outside my door. The Rodriguez family downstairs invited the twins to play with their children when they sensed I needed rest. The hospital social worker connected me with financial assistance programs I hadn't known existed. A foundation specifically for young adults with cancer provided a grant that covered 3 months of rent. Another organization specializing in support for cancer patients with young children delivered weekly meal kits with simple, nutritious recipes the twins could help prepare. My freelance clients, whom I'd expected to lose during treatment, surprised me with their loyalty. When I'd sent emails explaining my situation and requesting extended deadlines, nearly all responded with compassion and flexibility. 2 of my regulars even increased their rates to reflect market adjustment. 6 weeks into my treatment, as I was beginning to establish a rhythm with the new support systems in my life, the relative calm was shattered by an unexpected development. I was reviewing design proofs for a client when my phone rang with a call from Harriet Winters, my lawyer. "Megan, I've received some concerning documents I need to discuss with you immediately," she said, her typically measured voice tinged with urgency. "Your parents have filed for emergency grandparents' rights and temporary custody of the twins." The words hit me like a physical blow. "They've what?" "They're claiming you're medically unfit to care for the children during your treatment." The petition cites deteriorating health conditions and unstable childcare arrangements as grounds for temporary custody until you've completed treatment. I gripped the edge of my desk, bile rising in my throat. "That's absurd. I have a comprehensive care plan in place. The twins are thriving despite everything." "I know that, and will fight this vigorously," Harriet assured me. "But I need to warn you, they've hired Brandon Mills. He's aggressive, especially in grandparents' rights cases." The name was vaguely familiar. "Isn't he the attorney who was in the news last year for that custody battle between parents and grandparents?" "The same. He specializes in presenting grandparents as stable alternatives to challenging parental situations." Her voice softened slightly. "Megan, I have to ask, did you ever discuss custody arrangements with your parents? Even casually? Anything they might construe as agreement?" I thought back through my interactions with my parents before and after my diagnosis. Absolutely not. The opposite, in fact. I've repeatedly refused their occasional offers to take the twins off my hands for a weekend. They showed no interest in being involved grandparents until now. Good. That will help our case. I could hear papers shuffling on her end. Their petition includes some troubling claims. They're suggesting you've become erratic since your diagnosis, that your judgment is impaired by medication, and that you've surrounded the children with inappropriate strangers rather than family. My hands began to shake with a mixture of fear and rage. By inappropriate strangers, do they mean the trained volunteers from cancer support organizations? The neighbors who've been helping? My support group friends? Precisely. They're painting a picture of a chaotic household managed by rotating caregivers with no vetting or consistency. That's a complete distortion, I said, my voice rising. Every volunteer has undergone background checks. The twins have a consistent routine. Their preschool teachers have commented on how well they're adjusting, considering the circumstances. I'll need documentation of all that, Harriet replied. Statements from the preschool, information about the vetting process for volunteers, perhaps assessments from any healthcare providers who've observed you with the children. As we discussed strategy for fighting the petition, a sickening realization dawned on me. Ryan's visit. He was gathering information for this, wasn't he? Testing my responses, assessing my condition. It's possible, Harriet acknowledged. The petition does mention observations from a family member about your physical state and living conditions. The betrayal stung, though I shouldn't have been surprised. Ryan had always aligned himself with our parents' interests, especially when doing so might reflect well on him professionally. After ending the call with Harriet, I sat motionless, trying to process this new threat. The twins would be home from preschool in an hour, their usual exuberance a stark contrast to the heaviness settling over me. How could I shield them from this newest trauma while fighting cancer and now a legal battle? My phone buzzed with incoming messages. The cancer support group chat checking in, Diana confirming our next treatment day arrangements, Tamara sending photos of her twins in Portland. The juxtaposition of these genuine connections against my parents' malicious legal maneuver highlighted exactly what was at stake. Not just custody of my children, but our right to build a life defined by authentic love rather than obligation and control. When Mrs. Abernathy brought the twins home from preschool, I greeted them with forced cheerfulness, determined not to let my distress color their afternoon. As they showed me art projects and recounted playground adventures, I studied their faces, searching for any sign that the stability I'd worked so hard to maintain was faltering. But they seemed secure, even happy, despite the seismic changes in their young lives. After dinner, while the twins were engrossed in their bedtime story, I called Pauline, needing the perspective of someone who understood my situation intimately. "Custody petition?" she echoed, outrage evident in her voice. "That's low, even for family members who've shown their true colors." "I'm terrified," I admitted. "What if a judge sees a single mother with cancer and decides the twins would be better off with their grandparents? On paper, they look perfect. Financially secure, married for 40 years, a big house with separate bedrooms for the children." "That's not how family court works," Pauline said firmly, "especially not in cases like yours. Judges prioritize parental rights unless there's evidence of actual neglect or abuse. Being sick isn't neglect, and having community support instead of family help isn't dangerous. But the stress of fighting this. I'm already exhausted from treatment. I don't know if I have the strength for a legal battle, too." "You don't have to face it alone," she reminded me. "The same support network that's helping with your treatment can rally around this, too. Let me make some calls." By the following morning, Pauline had mobilized an astonishing response. 3 members of our support group had connections to family court advocates who specialized in protecting parents with medical conditions. A social worker from the hospital offered to provide a formal assessment of my home environment and parenting capacity during treatment. Even my oncologist, Dr. Patel, volunteered to submit a statement about how well I was managing my care plan while maintaining appropriate arrangements for the twins. The court date was set for 3 weeks later, strategically scheduled between my treatment sessions when I would be at my physical strongest. Harriet worked tirelessly to build our case, gathering documentation from every corner of my support system. The preschool director wrote a glowing assessment of the twins' adjustment and my continued engagement as a parent, despite my health challenges. Cancer Care Companions provided records of their volunteer screening process and the consistent scheduling they maintained for the twins. Even Mrs. Abernathy and other neighbors submitted letters testifying to the stable, loving environment I maintained for my children. As the hearing approached, my parents escalated their pressure tactics. They sent a series of emails alternatively threatening and cajoling, suggesting we could work something out without court involvement if I would be reasonable. My father called my remaining freelance clients, introducing himself as my concerned parent and suggesting they might want to reconsider arrangements with someone in my condition. Fortunately, my clients were universally disgusted by this tactic and immediately informed me. Most distressingly, they attempted to visit the twins' preschool, presenting themselves as authorized pickup people despite not being on the approved list. The director, already aware of the situation, politely but firmly turned them away and immediately notified me. The day before the hearing, Ryan appeared at my door unannounced. His expression was a mixture of discomfort and determination as he asked to come in. "I'd rather speak here," I said, remaining in the doorway. The twins were at a special activity day arranged by Cancer Care Companions, specifically to give me time to prepare for court. "This has gotten out of hand," Ryan began. "Mom and Dad are genuinely concerned about the twins' welfare. So concerned that they refused to watch them during my treatment and then filed for custody when I found alternative arrangements." He shifted uncomfortably. "They regret their initial response. They weren't thinking clearly." "And now they are? Now that they've hired an aggressive attorney, tried to undermine my livelihood, and attempted to remove my children from school without authorization?" "They're worried," he insisted. "Your cancer is serious, Megan. What happens to the twins if I die?" I finished bluntly. "I've made arrangements with Tamara and Dave in Portland. They're named as guardians in my will, which has been properly executed and filed." This clearly surprised him. "You've named friends as guardians over family?" "Friends who have been there for me consistently? Yes. Over family who see my children as inconveniences until they can be used as leverage." Ryan's professional facade cracked slightly. "That's not fair, isn't it? When did you last spend any meaningful time with Ellie and Noah? Do you even know which one is allergic to strawberries? Which one sleeps with a nightlight? What their favorite books are?" His silence was answer enough. "This isn't about the twins' welfare," I continued. "It's about control and money. Mom and Dad are furious that I stopped financing their retirement to pay for my cancer treatment. They're using my children as pawns to punish me and potentially gain access to any insurance money or assets if something happens to me." "That's a serious accusation," Ryan said stiffly. "It's the truth. And I suspect you know it, which makes your participation in this even more disappointing." He looked away, unable to meet my gaze. "They're our parents. They raised us. They raised us to feel perpetually indebted to them for doing the bare minimum," I corrected. "I'm breaking that cycle with my children." After a moment of uncomfortable silence, Ryan reached into his briefcase and withdrew a manila envelope. "I came to give you this. It's their settlement offer." I didn't take it. "There's nothing to settle. They have no case. You should review it anyway. Going to court tomorrow will be stressful for everyone. This offers a compromise." "What kind of compromise?" He hesitated. "They'll withdraw the custody petition if you agree to structured visitation rights and resume financial support at a reduced level, $1,000 monthly instead of the previous amount." The audacity was breathtaking. So they're essentially holding my relationship with my children hostage for money? They don't see it that way. Ryan replied weakly. How do they see it then? Explain it to me. He couldn't. After another awkward moment, he returned the envelope to his briefcase. Think about it, at least. Court is unpredictable. I have thought about it. For years, I've bent over backwards to maintain a relationship with people who consistently put their own interests above everyone else's. I'm done. I'll see you in court tomorrow. As I closed the door behind him, I felt a surprising sense of calm. Tomorrow would be difficult, perhaps one of the most challenging days since my diagnosis. But unlike my cancer, which had invaded my body without warning or invitation, this fight was one I had chosen. A conscious decision to protect my children and myself from people who had demonstrated time and again that they couldn't be trusted with our well-being. That evening, when the twins returned from their activity day, full of stories about the therapy dogs they'd met and the art projects they'd created, I held them a little tighter than usual. Whatever happened in court the next day, these precious children were worth every battle. They deserved a mother who stood firm against manipulation and toxic behavior, who showed them by example that love shouldn't come with conditions or price tags. As I tucked them into bed, Noah looked up at me with his father's earnest brown eyes. Mommy, are you still a warrior even without your mohawk? My hair had started to grow back, a soft fuzz covering my previously bare scalp. I'm always a warrior, I assured him. Some battles you can see, like fighting cancer. Other battles are invisible, but just as important. Like what? Ellie asked sleepily. Like standing up for what's right, even when it's hard, I said, kissing her forehead. Like protecting the people you love. We protect you too, Noah declared, puffing out his little chest. We're warriors like you. Yes, you are, I agreed, my heart full despite the looming court date. We're warriors together. The family court was nothing like the imposing marble edifices shown in legal dramas. Instead, it occupied 2 floors of a nondescript government building, its hallways filled with anxious families awaiting decisions that would reshape their lives. I sat on a hard bench outside courtroom C, Harriet beside me reviewing documents one final time, while my support team gathered nearby. Pauline had arranged her chemotherapy schedule to be present. Diana sat quietly knitting what looked like a child's hat, her calm presence a counterbalance to my nervous energy. Sarah from Cancer Care Companions had come with a thick folder of volunteer credentials and schedules. Even Mrs. Abernathy had insisted on attending, claiming she wouldn't miss it for the world. This mismatched group of cancer survivors, healthcare workers, and neighbors had become my chosen family in the crucible of illness and abandonment. My parents arrived with the precise timing of people accustomed to making an entrance. My mother wore an expertly tailored suit in a subdued navy that screamed wealthy restraint, while my father had opted for the distinguished gray he reserved for important business meetings. Ryan followed a few steps behind, his expression unreadable. Flanking them was a silver-haired man I assumed must be Brandon Mills, their attorney. My mother's eyes widened slightly at the sight of my assembled support team. Perhaps she had expected me to appear alone and vulnerable. Instead, I was surrounded by people who had shown more genuine care in a few months than she had demonstrated in my entire lifetime. We avoided direct interaction, maintaining opposite ends of the hallway until the bailiff called our case. Inside the courtroom, Judge Eleanor Vasquez, a woman in her 60s with shrewd eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, reviewed the filings briefly before addressing us. Before we begin formal proceedings, I want to be clear about something, she stated, looking directly at both legal teams. This court's primary concern is the well-being of the minor children. I have no patience for family disputes that use children as leverage in adult disagreements. Keep that in mind as we proceed. Brandon Mills rose first, presenting a carefully crafted narrative of concerned grandparents worried about their vulnerable grandchildren being cared for by a rotating cast of strangers while their mother underwent debilitating cancer treatment. He described my parents as pillars of the community, financially stable, with a suitable home environment and deep family bonds with the twins. Your Honor, the grandparents seek temporary custody only until Ms. Sullivan completes her medical treatment, he emphasized. They wish to provide stability during this challenging time, after which they would gladly return the children to their mother's care. Judge Vasquez listened without expression, occasionally making notes. When Mills mentioned the deep family bonds, she looked up sharply. Counsel, I see from the respondent's filing that prior to the mother's diagnosis, the grandparents saw the children approximately 4 times in the past year, with visits averaging less than 2 hours. Is that disputed? Mills hesitated. Your Honor, the limited visitation was due to geographical distance and scheduling conflicts, not lack of interest. The parties have lived in the same city for the past 6 months, correct? Yes, Your Honor, but... And these scheduling conflicts, they persisted even after the cancer diagnosis? My clients had certain commitments that were difficult to rearrange, Mills admitted reluctantly. Judge Vasquez made another note. Proceed. When it was Harriet's turn to present our case, she took a different approach. Rather than attacking my parents directly, she focused on the comprehensive support system I had established for the twins. Your Honor, Ms. Sullivan has done exactly what a responsible parent facing serious illness should do. She has created a structured, consistent care plan, utilizing both professional resources and community support. Harriet gestured to my supporters in the gallery. These are not random strangers, as opposing counsel suggests, but carefully vetted volunteers, medical professionals, and longtime family friends. She submitted the documentation we had gathered, statements from the preschool, volunteer credentials from cancer care companions, assessments from healthcare providers who had observed my parenting during treatment. Furthermore, Harriet continued, Mrs. Sullivan has maintained her work as a freelance graphic designer throughout treatment, ensuring financial stability for her family. The children are thriving in their current arrangement, as confirmed by their preschool teachers and pediatrician. When the judge asked about my parents' claim that they had previously provided significant support, Harriet was ready with bank statements showing the financial assistance had flowed in the opposite direction, from me to them, for the past 3 years. Ms. Sullivan supported her parents' early retirement with monthly payments of $2,200, which she continued even after her husband's death left her as a single mother. It was only when her cancer diagnosis created medical expenses that she redirected these funds to her own family's needs. The revelation seemed to surprise Judge Vasquez. She turned to Mills. Counsel, did your clients disclose this financial arrangement in their petition? Your Honor, the financial relationship between the parties is complex and mutually beneficial, Mills attempted, but the judge cut him off. That wasn't my question. Did they disclose that they were receiving regular financial support from the daughter they now claim is unable to manage her affairs? No, Your Honor. The judge's expression tightened. I see. The most difficult moment came when Brandon Mills called my mother to testify. She presented a carefully curated version of our relationship, describing herself as a devoted grandmother who had always been there for her daughter and grandchildren. When questioned about refusing to help during my treatment, she claimed a miscommunication about dates and importance. We thought it was a routine appointment, not an emergency situation, she insisted, her voice trembling with manufactured emotion. If we had understood the severity, of course we would have been there. Harriet's cross-examination was surgical. Mrs. Sullivan, did you receive a text message from your daughter explicitly stating she needed help during her first chemotherapy treatment? I don't recall the exact wording, my mother hedged. Harriet presented the text message records. The message reads, Mom, I need your help. My first chemo treatment is scheduled for Tuesday at 9 a.m. The oncologist says it will be intense and I'll need someone to watch the twins. Can you please help? Did you receive this message? Yes, but... And what was your response? My mother's composure slipped slightly. We had prior commitments. What commitments specifically? Robert had his investment group, and I had the wine tasting society. These are long-standing social and business obligations. More important than your daughter's cancer treatment? Objection, argumentative, Mills interjected. Sustained, Judge Vasquez ruled, but her expression suggested the point had been made. When it was my turn to testify, Harriet guided me through a calm explanation of my diagnosis, treatment plan, and the arrangements I'd made for the twins. I described the support network I'd built and the consistent routine we maintained despite the challenges of cancer treatment. During cross-examination, Mills attempted to portray me as physically incapable of caring for young children. Ms. Sullivan, have you experienced severe fatigue during your treatments? Yes, especially in the days immediately following chemotherapy. Nausea? Weakness? Cognitive effects, sometimes called chemo brain? All common side effects, yes. That's why I've arranged appropriate support during those periods. Wouldn't it be simpler and more stable for the children to stay in one home with their grandparents during your recovery, rather than navigating this complex network of volunteers and neighbors? I met his gaze directly. No, it wouldn't. My children are thriving in their home environment despite the challenges. They have consistent caregivers who follow our established routines. Moving them to grandparents they barely know, who have shown little interest in their lives until now, would be traumatic and unnecessary. Mills shifted tactics. Your mother testified that there was a miscommunication about the severity of your medical situation. Isn't it possible you didn't clearly communicate the urgency of your needs? No, I said firmly. I explicitly asked for help with childcare during chemotherapy. Their response was that they had a wine tasting and couldn't rearrange their schedules. And yet you immediately cut off financial support that they had come to depend on? I redirected money that I could no longer afford to give them toward medical expenses and childcare for my children. As a parent, my first responsibility is to my children's needs, not my parents' lifestyle choices. Judge Vasquez intervened at this point. Mr. Mills, I failed to see how the respondent's decision to prioritize her children's needs over optional financial support to able-bodied adults is relevant to the custody question. Mills retreated, and the judge called a brief recess before issuing her ruling. In the hallway, Harriet squeezed my hand reassuringly. You did well in there. The judge seems to see through your parents' claims. When we returned to the courtroom, Judge Vasquez delivered her decision with decisive clarity. Having reviewed all evidence and testimony, this court finds no basis for granting emergency custody to the petitioners. The children are currently in a stable, loving environment with appropriate support systems in place. The respondent has demonstrated remarkable resourcefulness in ensuring her children's needs are met while undergoing medical treatment. She turned her attention directly to my parents. Furthermore, this court is troubled by several aspects of the petitioner's case. The attempt to gain custody appears motivated more by financial considerations and control than by genuine concern for the children's welfare. The petitioner's refusal to provide even minimal assistance during the respondent's medical crisis, followed by this aggressive legal action, suggests an inappropriate use of the court system to punish the respondent for asserting financial independence. My mother's face had gone rigid with controlled fury. My father stared at the floor, a muscle working in his jaw. The petition for emergency custody is denied. Additionally, given the concerning behavior exhibited by the petitioners, including unauthorized attempt to remove the children from school and contacting the respondent's clients to undermine her livelihood, this court is issuing a temporary restraining order prohibiting the petitioners from contacting the respondent or her children for a period of 90 days. Judge Vasquez looked directly at me. Ms. Sullivan, after the 90-day period, if you wish to establish supervised visitation, you may petition the court. However, this will be entirely at your discretion. With a final tap of her gavel, it was over. My parents exited swiftly, not looking in my direction, while Ryan lingered briefly, his expression conflicted. For a moment, I thought he might approach me, but instead, he nodded once in what might have been acknowledgement before following our parents out. Outside the courthouse, surrounded by my support team, I felt something shift inside me, a weight lifting that I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying. For decades, I had measured my worth against my parents' impossible standards, seeking approval that was perpetually withheld. The court's validation of my parenting and rejection of their claims marked a definitive end to that cycle. "Ice cream," Pauline declared, linking her arm through mine. "This calls for celebration ice cream." "I should get home," I protested weakly. "The twins will be finished with preschool soon." "Already arranged," Diana smiled. "Mrs. Rodriguez is bringing them to Sweet Scoops at 4 o'clock to meet us." We planned for either outcome, but we were betting on this one. They had believed in me even when I hadn't fully believed in myself. At the ice cream parlor, watching the twins devour chocolate sundaes while chattering excitedly with the various members of our unconventional family, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. Cancer had taken much from me. My health, my energy, my hair, my sense of invulnerability. But it had also stripped away pretense and pretending, forcing me to distinguish between relationships based on obligation and those founded on genuine care. The most surprising transformation wasn't physical, but emotional. For the first time in my adult life, I felt truly liberated from the need to earn my parents' approval. Their rejection, which had once seemed like my greatest failure, now revealed itself as a doorway to authentic connection with people who accepted me exactly as I was. Cancer, struggles, imperfections, and all. That evening, as I tucked the twins into bed, Ellie looked up at me with solemn eyes. "Mommy, are you happy now?" The question caught me off guard. "Why do you ask that, sweetie?" "You're smiling with your eyes today. Sometimes you smile just with your mouth, but today it's your whole face. Children notice everything." "Yes, I am happy," I told her truthfully. "We have wonderful people in our lives who care about us very much." "Like a chosen family," Noah piped up, proud of the new phrase he'd apparently picked up. "Miss Diana said we have a chosen family who loves us even if they don't have the same blood." "Miss Diana is very wise," I agreed, my heart full. As I closed their bedroom door, leaving the soft glow of constellation nightlights watching over their sleep, I reflected on how profoundly our lives had changed in just a few months. Cancer had brought unexpected gifts alongside its undeniable hardships: a community of supporters, a clearer sense of priorities, and perhaps most importantly, the courage to define family based on love and actions rather than biology and obligation. The road ahead remained daunting. I still had months of treatment to endure, financial challenges to navigate, and the looming uncertainty of prognosis that every cancer patient carries. But for the first time, I faced these challenges standing firmly in my own truth, no longer contorting myself to earn conditional acceptance from people incapable of giving unconditional love. In the quiet of the evening, surrounded by the evidence of our modest but love-filled life, children's artwork on the refrigerator, get-well cards from new friends covering the bulletin board, the calendar marked with treatment dates and volunteer schedules, I recognized that transformation often comes disguised as devastation. Cancer had broken open my life, but in that breaking, created space for something far more precious to grow. 6 months after the court hearing, I sat in Dr. Patel's office awaiting the results of my post-treatment scans. The chemotherapy regimen had concluded 3 weeks earlier, leaving me physically depleted but emotionally stronger than I'd ever been. The twins, now approaching their 5th birthday, had adapted to our new normal, with the remarkable resilience children often demonstrate when surrounded by consistent love and honesty. Dr. Patel entered with a smile that immediately eased the knot of tension in my chest. "The scans look good, Megan. Very good. No evidence of disease." Those simple words, "no evidence of disease," held an entire universe of relief and possibility. Not a guarantee, of course. Cancer survivors live with the specter of recurrence, a shadow that never completely disappears. But it was the best possible news at this juncture, a milestone worth celebrating. "So, what happens now?" I asked, my voice steadier than I expected. "Now we monitor. Follow-up scans every 3 months for the first year, then extending to 6 months if things remain clear. You'll continue hormone therapy for 5 years given your cancer type, but the intensive treatment phase is behind you." Behind me. The phrase resonated as I left the hospital, blinking in the bright autumn sunshine. So much lay behind me now. Not just chemotherapy, but also the exhausting dance of seeking approval from people who viewed love as a transaction rather than a gift. The 90-day restraining order against my parents had expired without incident. They had made no attempt to contact me or the twins once the court ruled against them. Through mutual acquaintances, I heard they had sold their townhouse and relocated to Florida, ostensibly for my father's arthritis, but more likely to escape the social embarrassment of losing the court case. My brother Ryan had sent a terse email, congratulating me on completing treatment, but made no mention of repairing our relationship or maintaining contact with his niece and nephew. Their absence created space for genuine connections to flourish. Pauline's cancer support group had become a cornerstone of my social life, offering understanding that even well-meaning friends without cancer experience couldn't provide. The twins had blossomed in the embrace of our chosen family, developing attachments to consistent caregivers like Diana, Katie, and Mrs. Abernathy, who continued to be present in our lives even after my treatment ended. Most surprisingly, I had developed a close friendship with Sarah from Cancer Care Companions. Our relationship had evolved from professional coordination to personal connection as we discovered shared interests in photography and hiking. She had invited the twins and me on weekend nature walks when my energy permitted, documenting our adventures with her professional camera. These outings became healing rituals, connecting us to a world beyond cancer and family drama. To celebrate the good scan results, I organized a small gathering in our apartment. Not a cancer-free party, a term that felt tempting fate, but a gratitude celebration, acknowledging everyone who had helped us through the darkest months. The twins enthusiastically created decorations, their art skills having flourished under the tutelage of Tanya from the support group, who had introduced them to new techniques during her childcare shifts. As our guests arrived bearing potluck, dishes, and small gifts, I was struck by how this assortment of people, once strangers brought together by crisis, had become integral to our lives. The twins moved comfortably among them, sharing stories and seeking attention with the ease of children who feel securely attached to their community. "You've created something beautiful here," Diana observed, watching the twins demonstrate a complicated handshake ritual they had developed with Mr. Rodriguez's son. Not many people could turn cancer and family rejection into this. "I had help," I reminded her, gesturing to the room full of supporters. "Yes, but you were open to accepting it," she countered. "That's rarer than you might think. Many people in your situation would have either retreated into isolation or capitulated to their parents' demands just to avoid conflict." Her observation gave me pause. The Megan of a year ago might indeed have done exactly that, sacrificed her autonomy and her children's emotional well-being to maintain a superficial peace with her parents. Cancer had forced me to recognize what truly mattered, burning away, the chaff of obligation and appearance to reveal the essential core of authentic connection. Later that evening, after our guests had departed and the twins were tucked into bed, I sat on our small balcony, watching the city lights flicker against the darkening sky. My phone buzzed with an unexpected notification, an email from my aunt, Patricia, My mother's sister, whom I hadn't heard from since before the court case. Megan, it began simply, I owe you an apology for not reaching out sooner. Your mother informed the family that contact with you was legally prohibited. But I recently learned from a mutual acquaintance that this was not entirely truthful. More importantly, I heard about your completed treatment, congratulations, and wanted to connect. The email continued, explaining that Aunt Patricia had experienced her own falling out with my mother years earlier, but had maintained limited contact for family harmony. Your courage in setting boundaries has inspired me to reassess some of my own choices, she wrote. If you're open to it, I'd love to rebuild our relationship on more honest terms, and perhaps eventually get to know those wonderful twins I've heard so much about. Her message ended with no pressure or expectation, just an open door should I choose to walk through it. I sat with the possibility, testing my feelings about reconnecting with even a peripheral member of my biological family. Unlike my parents' communications, Aunt Patricia's note contained no demands, no guilt-inducing language, no subtle manipulations, just a genuine expression of regret and interest in connection. This, I realized, was the fundamental difference. Healthy relationships offered choice rather than obligation, respect rather than control, authenticity rather than performance. The past year had taught me to recognize the distinction with unflinching clarity. After thoughtful consideration, I replied to Aunt Patricia's email with cautious openness, suggesting we begin with phone conversations before involving the twins. Her response was immediately respectful of these boundaries, another encouraging sign that this family connection might be worth exploring, unlike the ones I had necessarily severed. The following weekend, Sarah invited us to join her for a photography expedition at the Boston Harbor Islands. The autumn weather was perfect, crisp and clear with leaves beginning to turn vibrant shades of red and gold. The twins raced along the shoreline collecting shells and interesting stones while Sarah captured candid images of our adventure. I have something for you, she said as we watched the children examining a tide pool. She handed me a small wrapped package, a completion gift. Inside was a beautiful leather-bound album filled with photographs Sarah had taken over the past 6 months. The twins building their first snowman after my second treatment, my purple mohawk day surrounded by supportive friends, quiet moments, reading stories during recovery periods, all the way through to recent images showing my hair beginning to grow back in soft curls and my face filling out as the treatment effects gradually receded. The final page held a photograph I didn't remember being taken. It showed me from behind, standing at the courthouse steps after the custody hearing, surrounded by my support team. My posture was straight, my head held high despite my thin frame, and the colorful scarf covering my bald head. The twins stood on either side of me, looking up with expressions of complete trust. "This is my favorite," Sarah said softly. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.